And now some breaking news that's coming in from the U.S. of reports of a shooting near the NSA headquarters in Maryland in the U.S. Details are still sketchy. What we know at this point is that President Donald Trump has been briefed about this incident, and some reports say that there are 7 victims, including a police officer. By victim, we mean people who've sustained injuries. Very little in terms of details that we have at this point, but this is at Fort Meade, shooting taking place outside the NSA intelligence agency in Maryland in the U.S., and several people apparently have been injured. Pictures show a black SUV with bullet holes in the windscreen outside the Fort Meade Center. A car appears to have crashed into a concrete barrier. The lone gunman has been taken into custody, and the FBI is investigating the situation according to local media reports. So one person has been taken into custody. Police were called to this incident near the main visitor gate, and none of these injuries are believed to be life-threatening. So several people, including a police officer, injured, but they'll all be fine, is the sense that we are getting. The road approaching this area has now been closed. Understandably, this area has been cordoned off, and security agencies have taken over. This is a very, very sensitive area that we're talking about. At least 3 people injured. 1 person is in custody. This is the National Security Agency Spy Center in the U.S. that we're talking about. And WION's Malcolm Brown is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Malcolm, what details do we have at this point?
Seeing on cameras, and the reports that we're getting from both local media and from the emergency services, are that a vehicle, what we know apparently from our own eyes, is that a vehicle has crashed into security barriers outside the NSA, the National Security Agency, the super secret spy agency which does electronic gathering of intelligence worldwide. Its headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C. at Fort Meade in the state of Maryland. Anyway, a black SUV, sport utility vehicle, is crashed into the concrete barriers outside that facility. There do appear, and I can't confirm this, to be some bullet holes in that vehicle. There are local reports that at least 3 people have been injured and that somebody is in custody. The circumstances of the shots fired, whether it was incoming, outgoing, we don't yet know. What's also apparent from the scene, from helicopter aerials that have been screened by local media, we can see that airbags have deployed in the vehicle, so a collision of some speed clearly occurred, and local security forces, those tasked with guarding NSA, as you can imagine, security is pretty tight there. I have seen a sniffer dog going through the SUV, or around going through some items that are outside the SUV, the rear of which is open.
This is not being called an attack yet, is it?
So we don't know whether it's an attack or not. Clearly, at this point, it can be called a security incident. Whether or not it was a deliberate attack or some kind of odd misunderstanding, we don't know.
Right, I understand the details of what transpired this morning are still sketchy, but for our viewers here in India and other parts of Asia, why don't you tell us a little more about this establishment, Fort Meade? We're looking at pictures of rows and rows of cars parked there. This is the National Security Agency headquarters in the U.S., and that makes it a very, very sensitive location.
That's right. It's the equivalent to GCHQ in the United Kingdom, for instance. It's a vast campus. You can drive past it and see elements of it from the road nearby. It's normally surrounded by high fences and razor wire, and entry posts are guarded going in and out of the base. So it is a very secure facility, but it's also a vast and rambling facility that employs thousands of people. This is where the United States collates and sifts through information that comes from sensors all around the world, the kind of electronic snooping that the US does and other nations do of the internet and other radio traffic, that kind of stuff.
Do we know anything about the person who's been taken into custody for questioning?
We do understand that one person is in custody. Also, there are these reports that 3 people have been injured in this incident. You would have to imagine that they will be in some form of custody as well, but that has not yet been confirmed by the authorities. Clearly, you've got a slightly complicated chain of command here. You've got security that's tasked with defending Fort Meade, the NSA facility. Then you have local police and fire brigade and ambulance who are also all involved. They tend, in an incident like this, to defer for the release of information to some extent, or the kind of information we'd most want to know about would probably come from the NSA or other agencies of the federal government.
I'm also looking at some local media reports which say that this incident happened at gate number 1 of the NSA campus, and this is a stolen SUV, the pictures of which we're showing on our screen. It has bullet holes on the windshield and it crashed into the security barrier there. The FBI is investigating what happened. What is the standard operating procedure, Malcolm, when an incident like this happened? Has traffic been halted? Has this area been cordoned off? You say it's a sprawling campus. How do they manage the scene of this quote-unquote incident?
Well, clearly the gate where this has occurred, the entry point, and there are multiple entry points to Fort Meade, that area appears to have been sealed off, and we have seen armed officers, they would be routinely armed, with dogs checking out the remains of the vehicle. As we've said, it's had the airbags deployed. The vehicle itself is somewhat damaged, not heavily damaged. It's propped right up against one of those, or some of those, concrete barriers, and the concrete barriers you can see are stenciled with NSA, so we do have a sense of place for that. Local roads are likely to be affected. You've got an emergency response, which may now in fact be over, but in terms of an ambulance response, certainly the local fire department, which would also cover ambulance, has been involved, and then clearly the security forces on the side of the NSA itself.
Right. Malcolm, have incidents like these of shooting, of vehicle-related terror incidents or bids gone up in the past 1 year, or is the media talking about it more under Donald Trump?
No, I mean, this is not the first time this happened, and you can go back decades, for instance, to a shooting outside, although that was a gunman who attacked the traffic outside CIA headquarters decades ago. So this is not a novel thing. Clearly, security around these facilities, particularly ingress and egress points, tends to be pretty tight, and traffic that may be behaving a certain way is treated differently than if it was just driving down a normal road. But we don't really know yet whether this is an attack or, as I say, or a misunderstanding. But clearly, given the sensitivity of the location, the immediate question is whether or not this was some kind of terrorist attack or security incident, particularly given that multiple people were inside the vehicle, reportedly.
Malcolm Brown, thanks very much for that update, and details still trickling in about what happened at the NSA headquarters in Maryland.